Last night, we brought you the story of the wildly embarrassing bombshell that has blown up the right-wing case against President Joe Biden and his sole surviving son. The special counsel investigating the Bidens, Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney David Weiss, has now indicted his own key informant for lying. 43-year-old Alexander Smirnov was arrested Wednesday and charged on 2 counts for feeding the FBI false information. Smirnov's allegation that Joe and Hunter Biden received $5 million bribes from a Ukrainian company has always been manifestly absurd. And yet, it was the central point of the Republican argument for President Biden's impeachment. Republican politicians and the right-wing media relied on this discredited informant to make their case over and over and over again.
A veteran FBI informant alleging both the president and Hunter Biden each took $5 million in bribes.
The details come from an FBI informant who is very trusted.
A highly reliable informant that has always checked out. All the information he's ever given us is checked out.
We have determined that whistleblower is extremely credible.
This is a very crucial piece of our investigation.
A confidential human source that had been reliable previously to the FBI.
A confidential informant that they had on the payroll.
Documented allegations of bribery from a trusted FBI confidential human source has now finally been released. Now, its contents are devastating.
Trusted, so reliable, highly credible. In fact, in just 1 year, Sean Hannity, that guy you just saw there, promoted the bogus claims of that so-called trusted informant no less than 85 times on his show. 28 of those segments were Hannity monologues, long ones, on the topic. And of course, it was a joint effort between Fox News and elected Republicans like Texas podcaster Ted Cruz, who talked about it ad nauseum on his thrice weekly program called The Big Cushy Chair, or whatever it is. So you might think, given the fact that their entire case just fell apart in the most public and embarrassing way imaginable, that at least some of these people would feel they had to address it. Say if you're a Fox News broadcaster who had been repeating what you now know to be a lie to your audience for months. No, of course, they didn't even mention it. As of last night, at least. Fox News, take a look at what they were talking about last night when the story broke on Fox News.
And welcome to Hannity. And today was an unmitigated disaster for Fulton County DA Fani Willis.
Fanny lines blurred, allowing a county DA to bring charges against a former U.S. president is absurd and destructive.
Fanny and the lover boy in the hot seat. The Trump Georgia case falls apart.
But remember, this isn't a Fanny and Loverboy scandal. It's a Biden scandal.
We also have to remember that Joe Biden at this point is essentially a vegetable.
Another knock on Joe Biden's leaky bucket of a brain.
Obama and the CIA caught cooking the books. Brand new bombshells.
Just the usual charming content across all of Fox News primetime last night during this big story. There were 0 mentions of their favorite FBI informant. 0. Now, I think tonight they might get to it once they've gotten their stories straight, break it to their audience. The person they've been relying on for over a year with this ludicrous claim wasn't telling the truth, has in fact been arrested for making it up. But, we know this. Fox News is not a journalistic organization. Their purpose is to create an alternate reality for their viewers where they hear only what the conservative movement wants them to hear. We know that because they paid out the largest media defamation settlement in all of U.S. history to the tune of nearly $800 million for creating the alternate reality. The election was stolen from Donald Trump, and we know they knew that was false. And believe me, they saw the news about their number one informant yesterday. They just chose to ignore it. How embarrassing. And here I was thinking Sean Hannity always wants to set the record straight.
Again, on this show, we always want to set the record straight.
Navalny knew what would happen when he returned to Russia, and he had a message for his supporters in the world when it did.
My message for the situation when I'm killed is very simple: not give up.
Do me a favor, answer this one in Russian.
И здесь у меня просто очевидная вещь. Ну, не сдавайтесь. Не надо, нельзя сдаваться. Если это произошло, это означает, что мы необыкновенно сильны в этот момент, раз они решили меня убить.
Mikhail Zygar is the founding editor of the exiled independent Russian media outlet TV Rain. He's author of War and Punishment, Putin, Zelensky, and the Path to Russia's Invasion of Ukraine. He was in contact with Navalny during his imprisonment, received this letter from him in just this past week, and Mikhail Zygar joins me now. It's wonderful to have you, and I'm so sorry about what happened.
Yeah, and I could explain what means he went for a walk. In this letter here, he wrote to me that he could not see anything from his prison cell, and there was the next cell for walks. So when he was walking, he was not outside of the prison. He was inside, and he couldn't see anything outside. So yeah, it was much worse condition than we can imagine.
What I imagine you and people like you in your circle, people that have been opposed to Putin, Russian exiles and even people within Russia, have been anticipating this moment.
No.
No.
No, you know, it's weird. But as we used to think that he's not an ordinary human being.
Navalny.
I remember that back in 2015, I published a book, All the Kremlin's Men, and one of the chapters was about Navalny. And I started that chapter saying that he's not an ordinary human being, he's an alien. He's supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
He has always been so sure that his destiny was to fight against the regime. And everyone seemed to consider him to be the person doomed to be the next president of Russia. He had to be Russia's first real George Washington. He had to be Russia's first democratically elected leader, and the leader who wanted Russia to be a democracy. And we have always considered to be the next ideal president of Russia.
Like there was fate. He was fated.
Yes. He survived assassination attempt back in 2020. He was that time. It was a joke, but it was not funny. But it was a joke. He has always been compared to Harry Potter, who was not killed by
the boy who lived
by Voldemort. Yeah, and so it was impossible to even this morning. No one could believe that's something beyond our comprehension.
What does his death mean for Russia in this very, very fraught moment at a time when repression has, in the wake of the war, that's when you left, when basically in the wake of the war, new levels of repression, criminalization of even mentioning the war happened. You were forced to leave Russia at that time. At this moment when repression has increased so much, what does this mean?
You know, a lot of people were and are crying today because of his death and because they think that they have lost hope. Because he was the only, for a lot of people inside of Russia and outside of Russia, he was the symbol of the possibility of that decent democratic future. And, you know, during the whole day, I was trying to talk to people and try to give them some kind of hope. And my idea is that at least we have the moral example. At least now we have probably the first real democratic superhero in Russian history, because Russian history is very traumatic. And it's very imperialist. We have a huge history of violence, and not a history of prominent human rights defenders. So I think that the person who could have become our George Washington, sadly, has become our Martin Luther King. But he is going to be our moral example, and he is going to be the person who has led us, who has shown the way, and he was probably the only idealist, and he was the only politician for many years. I must say that the political process in Russia has been eliminated back 20 years ago. And he was the only person who could not agree with the fact that he could not be a politician. He was running political campaigns. He was fighting against President Putin. He was trying to run for the president back in 2018. And it's important that he has always been an idealistic person. He has always believed in human rights, in free speech, in possibility of fair justice. And, you know, it's very remarkable for Russia because Russia is a very cynical country. And, yeah, unfortunately, and that's the message that Putin's propaganda is trying to spread, that democracy is impossible. There are no democratic countries in the world. Free speech cannot exist. There is no fair justice anywhere in the world. Everyone is corrupted.
It's corrupt, it's rigged, it's fixed.
That's and he was the person who spent years trying to defend that righteous cause. And I think that it's very important because he is going to be the hero for the generations to come, for the generations of Russians.
Mikhail Zygar, I can't tell you what an honor it is to have you here, and thank you for coming on a very, very difficult day.
Thank you,
a lot. Thank you, sir.
This tragedy reminds us of the stakes of this moment. We have to provide the funding so Ukraine can keep defending itself against Putin's vicious onslaughts and war crimes. You know, there was a bipartisan Senate vote that passed overwhelmingly in the United States Senate to fund Ukraine. Now, as I've said before, and I mean this in a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching the House of Representatives. The failure to support Ukraine at this critical moment will never be forgotten.
The death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny and the reminder of the vicious nature of the Putin regime comes in this crucial moment where the Ukrainian army resisting Russian aggression is basically running out of bullets and sending dire warnings. A bipartisan package that includes aid for Ukraine has passed the Senate. The House is basically refusing to take it up under orders of Putin's #1 American enabler, the head of the Republican Party, Donald Trump. Now, some Republicans have posted little tweets and statements, Speaker Mike Johnson even saying, "We must be clear that Putin will be met with united opposition." But they are not discussing the obvious elephant in the room, which is that the reason Mike Johnson is not taking up the foreign aid package is because Donald Trump doesn't want Ukraine aid to pass. He wants Putin to emerge victorious because he needs Putin's support. Joining me now is Congressman Mike Quigley, Democrat of Illinois. He represents one of the oldest and largest Ukrainian-American communities in the U.S. He's been an outspoken proponent of supporting Ukraine. He's also co-chair of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus. Congressman, it's great to have you on. First, just start with what you think the import of the death of Navalny in Russian custody is for the conversation debate about aid here in the U.S.
Sure. I think it's important that he not die in vain. He's a hero for our lifetime. The reason we're fighting in Ukraine is the reason we fought the Second World War, is the fight against tyrants taking over a sovereign democratic country. So I think the best way we can honor him is get the hell back to Washington, D.C. and pass this aid package. It's extraordinarily frustrating, largely because you talk about voices from the past. Let's remember the Reagan doctrine, right? He spoke eloquently of defending any ally against Soviet aggression, and there'd be no limit to that. Well, this is the quintessential opportunity to step up and do just that. And remember that, I guess I will also remember that we still have other friends there, Evan, Paul, Mark, and others, as well as roughly 100,000 Ukrainian children stolen by Putin. If this isn't the time we step up, we've got to ask ourselves who we are as a country.
Now, there is a Senate bill that's passed. The House has just been is on recess for the next 2 weeks, if I understand that correctly, through February 28th, I believe. This is the Wall Street Journal today talking about how Mike Johnson's basically lost control of the House of Representatives. I can't think of a better way to say it, and how he would get this to the floor. Johnson's challenge uses uniting his conference now loom over efforts to shore up Ukraine, just as Congress also faces deadlines next month to pass legislation funding the federal government and avoid a partial shutdown. House Democrats are weighing unusual parliamentary maneuvers that will require the help of at least a few Republicans to execute. They include a discharge position, a move designed to circumvent the House Speaker and force a vote on Ukraine. I read today that people were talking about a discharge position at the Munich Security Conference halfway across the world. What are the conversations amongst Democrats and maybe with other Republicans happening right now about this?
Look, there's probably about a half the Republicans in their caucus who support funding Ukraine. And how do you do that? How do you get a bill to the floor? First, real simple. The Speaker lets the bill get to the floor. I think democracy dictates that. When the Senate passes something in this day and age with 70 votes, I mean, McCann, put the bill on the floor. There are other options. As you might know, the paperwork was done today to do a discharge petition using that Senate bill. It's probably the only bill that can get to the president's desk. It is not perfect. Another bill that was attempted that also dealt with border security was squelched by, I guess, the Republican on high candidate Trump. So this is our best opportunity. I asked my Republican colleagues, I asked the Speaker of the House to have that sense of history and recognize that sometimes doing the right thing is more important than keeping your gavel. At some point, who's going to remember who the Speaker of the House was when we did something so horrible, and he's the one that held it back? That's a sense of history he should have as well.
Let me ask you, you've been very outspoken on this issue, and you represent a ton of folks who are Ukrainian American from the Ukrainian diaspora, and people have relatives and family there. Are there, you said half the Republican caucus, and my sense is there's probably 300 votes in the House right now, something like that, for this aid package, maybe 280, somewhere there. Are there people on the Republican side in leadership who share your conviction? And do they have any say in this? I mean, is it just Johnson taking orders from the sort of far right of the caucus and Trump, or are there people who view this the same way you do?
Oh, look, I traveled to Germany with Republicans who care. We were visiting Ukrainian troops, learning how to use our tanks. I traveled to Ukraine with French Hill, who is very dedicated to this cause. My message to all my Republican friends is, look, if the far right can hijack your party with 10 to 20 people, you can take it back. You can make a stand. If 10 or 20 can threaten the Speaker and to do the wrong thing, nearly half of the caucus can threaten the Speaker to do the right thing. There's not going to be a more important bill that deals with democracy in our lifetime. I said this is the reason we fought the Second World War. It's why we formed the United Nations. It's why we formed NATO. It is the essence of our own security. If we don't remember voices from the past, let's remember those from the future. Let's think about those from right now, that is. General Milley and Secretary Austin, who said, if you don't stand up to the aggression of Putin, you're going to have to double our defense budget, and you're certainly inviting more bloodshed.
All right, Congressman Mike Quigley again. Congressman from Illinois, Chicago, neighborhoods I lived in and loved. It's great to have you on, Congressman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.